Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Mala Thakur, Senior Director of Programs at the National Association of Workforce Boards. Thank you for joining us today for the first session of NAWB's Winter Webinar Series. And today's session is SNAP E&T Evaluation, Promising Practices and Recommendations. And we'll hear from our guests in just a moment. We're thrilled to have you here to explore our work on SNAP E&T and hear from our presenters. We also wanted to take a moment to invite you to consider becoming a member of NAWB. Membership provides access to valuable resources and information like today's webinar and networking opportunities, policy alerts, and our weekly newsletter. We serve as a collective voice to advocate for workforce development across the country. We hope you'll join us in our efforts to strengthen workforce systems that support communities across the country. If you want to learn more about NAWB membership, please email us at nawb@nawb.org, and we'll drop that in the chat. And before I turn it over to our colleagues, I just wanted to, share that our colleagues from Social Policy Research Associates will share findings and recommendations from the recent SNAP E&T evaluation of NAWB's National Partnership Grant from USDA Food and Nutrition Service. SPR will discuss the scope and purpose of the evaluation, lessons and opportunities to engage workforce development boards in SNAP E&T, and recommendations for the future. Please note that we plan to record today's webinar. We'll share the recordings and other materials afterwards. And with that, I'll turn it over to our colleagues, Kristin Wolff and Madeleine Levin at SPR Associates to begin today's session.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Mala. And so glad that everybody could make it today. I see some of the folks in chat who actually participated with us in this endeavor. So happy that you could make it. All right. So I'm Kristin Wolff. I'm with Social Policy Research. I helped work on the project. And I'll provide a little bit of a guidance here during our session today. And so with that, I guess we'll review the agenda. So we're doing introductions now. If you haven't submitted your name in chat, please feel free. First, we'll cover sort of an overview of the evaluation. Mala kind of introduced the basics, but we'll kind of give you a little bit of, what was the method, what was the timing, that sort of thing. And then Madeleine will cover a lot of the findings. What did we learn? What were the successes, the challenges, some promising practices? And then at the very end there, we'll talk a little bit about recommendations. We will save time for a discussion, but we also invite your questions all the way along. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in chat, and we'll stop periodically to just, see if anyone has reactions. And so if you're unable to use chat, you can use an emoji or you can raise your hand, and we're happy to answer questions that way as well. We'll also have a few polls that we introduce all the way through. Speaking of polls, I think we have our first one right now, and I think Danny will launch that. So we'll just sit tight here and let you respond to that one. How are we doing, Danny? We getting some responses?
Yes, we sure are. We're about 68%, 71 now, so we're doing great.
All right, thank you so much. All right, well, while we're waiting to sort of see the responses, go ahead and keep submitting them. I see there's still a lot of activity in chat, so folks are still joining. If you haven't introduced yourself, go ahead and introduce yourself in chat now. And we'll just continue along. Can we have the next slide there, Zach? Thanks so much. Just a couple quick words about SPR. So we're a small business. We're in Oakland, California. Some of you may know us from lots of the evaluation work we do. We spend a lot of time in the WIOA and public workforce space, also in human services. Oh, there it is. Let's just go ahead, Danny, put that back up and we'll take a look. All right, so let's see where we landed. It looks like lots of folks are new to SNAP ENT. Okay, so that's super good to know, and we are glad you're here. Others have received some email about it. Some may have attended a session, maybe even with us. So glad to see you back if that was you. And it looks like a few of you are very familiar. For those of you who are in the 4%, it would be great if you could make yourselves known in chat. And then when we get to discussion, we may sort of call on you to share your experiences. So thanks so much for that. Okay, so just, quick couple words here. So like I was saying, some of you may know us from the evaluation work we do. We often see you when we do sort of evaluations at WIOA or specific programs within it. We also do quite a bit of TA, which we love. And in general, we are evidence-based believers in the promise of workforce and the public workforce system. And we are also currently the one-stop operator in San Francisco. So we also roll our sleeves up and get there and partner with you to get a lot of this work done on the ground. Okay, so moving along, I'm going to ask Madeleine to take just a couple minutes on the next slide, especially given that so many of you are new to SNAP ENT. Madeleine, do you want to take a few minutes and just describe SNAP ENT?
Sure. I know that a lot of you were not aware of this initiative. I know some of you many of the 60% though might know something about SNAP ENT, and we have at least one federal expert and other many experts on the webinar. So it's wonderful to have so much expertise. I felt like we should just do a really brief overview and to say that SNAP employment and training programs are a part of SNAP, which may have a different name in your state. And Washington State, it's called Basic Food, and California, it's called CalFresh. And the employment and training program can go by different names as well. But it's basically a voluntary program for any SNAP participant that wants to take advantage of it. If they're not already receiving TANF, cash assistance or work programming through TANF, and then it's been a real time of change during this period that we're going to be talking about, from the pandemic to the present in the program. But the structure of the program hasn't changed. It includes funding through this program for training, for supervised job search, and all the kinds of basic employment and training activities that you all do. And it also requires case management for all participants, which is supposed to, encourage people to really have a training track that makes sense toward employment. And one of the features of the program is that it can reimburse 50% of costs for training and services that are provided by providers that are part of the SNAP Employment and Training Network. So there are multiple ways that workforce boards can be involved with SNAP Employment and Training, and that's what this project was working on, ensuring that people know about it. Some of you, like in the state of Texas, are already have unified programs. I just dropped into the chat where the NAWB resources are for SNAP Employment and Training. So any of you that want more basic information can take a look. But I think that there's such variation in implementation of this program. In some states, it is unified as part of the workforce system, and in other states, in many states, it operates completely independent of the workforce system. And for many years, the agencies involved, the Department of Labor and USDA, Food and Nutrition Service, have tried to work together. They've had a cooperative agreement at the federal level, encourage states to work together, and more recently actually have a federal staff in each USDA regional office, in each federal office, that's in charge of helping people collaborate to make the program a success in the states in their region. So more and more resources have gone into collaboration between SNAP Employment and Training and WIOA. And that's what this project that we're going to be telling you about is one of those outgrowths in the effort to increase collaborative relationships. And I want to say that if people have questions about the complexities of SNAP Employment and Training, please put them into the chat or feel free to just put your question out there now. I want to say that we're at a time of change, that since the pandemic, changes in SNAP and SNAP ENT are expiring, more and more states are going to be requiring certain participants in SNAP Employment and SNAP to participate in SNAP ENT, or they might lose their benefits. So there will be an increasing number of folks, they're called able-bodied adults without dependents, who must participate in the SNAP Employment and Training Program in order to maintain their SNAP benefits. So there's lots of variation and changes that happen as time goes on, and it can be really confusing. So please do put your questions in the chat, and we'll move on for now to tell you more about the project, and we can bring up different, issues or aspects of SNAP Employment and Training as we go along.
Thanks, Madeleine. So just a quick overview of this initiative. And the timing here is important. Remember, it was 2020, so when things were sort of closing down, which added all sorts of complexities. But NAWB partnered with Third Sector Capital Partners and the Seattle Jobs Initiative under a SNAP ENT National Partnership Grant to support technical assistance to sort of a network of workforce boards that were interested in increasing their collaboration with SNAP ENT and potentially to become third-party SNAP ENT providers. So when we came in kind of on the back end, we conducted an evaluation last year between March and December, just to look at grant-funded activities and identify some lessons learned that could inform progress going forward. And I think we have another poll now. Danny, you want to launch that poll? Terrific. Thanks so much. So this one is intended to sort of tell us something about workforce board and SNAP ENT collaboration amongst the folks that are on the call. Take a minute. And in the meantime, Zach, let's just go ahead and go on to the next slide. Thanks. So here are sort of the basic research questions. Pretty basic. How did boards engage in this technical assistance? What helped and what got in the way of becoming a third-party provider for boards that sought to do that? What did people learn from the technical assistance? And then finally, what do the successes and challenges tell us about the directions that we might use to go forward? So those were the questions, and I guess we'll just go to the next slide and let the results of the poll come in. And then here were there they are. Okay, thank you so much, Danny. Okay, let's see. So there's a nice spread here. It looks like there's sort of, pretty good general sense of partnerships, some deep, some less deep. Yeah, pretty good spread here. Super. So thanks so much for contributing those responses. And then just to cover the evaluation methods, we did surveys. They weren't necessarily pre and post, and that's important because the idea was to get a sense of where boards started and then what was learned, but it wasn't apples to apples. We didn't have the same participants in the first survey as the second. Nonetheless, we had good participation, so we learned a lot. And then we conducted a lot of interviews last year with the boards that had participated in the TA. So with that, I will invite people to put any questions they might have to date or just any reactions in chat. We'll just do that all the way along and turn it over to Madeleine. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kristin. I really don't mind being interrupted, and I do welcome any questions as we go along. So as Kristin said, one of the main learning sources for our evaluation was discussions with people that had participated in the services offered by NAWB over the course of these several years. For opportunities and those to learn more and to work together to increase their collaboration with SNAP ENT. So one of the main efforts was a community of practice. It was a group of workforce boards that came together for various meetings to work on these issues together. And in our interviewees, 8 people that we interviewed had participated in that. And then at the NAWB forums, which is the annual NAWB conference, there were also institutes, several hours long, often at each forum, where NAWB presented progress and solutions to challenges that people were making in different localities. And then, in addition, a very important part of the project was direct support from the Seattle Jobs Initiative. I think we have somebody from Seattle Jobs Initiative on the webinar. If you're there, please make sure to identify yourself in the chat, because they still are a key partner in this work and a major expert in SNAP ENT and workforce board collaboration. So they gave direct technical assistance to multiple workforce boards, and 9 of the 16 people that we interviewed had gotten that direct support from Seattle Jobs Initiative. And then another group had half of the participants had also participated in a local convening, a webinar, other technical assistance that was offered by NAWB. And so we were really able to find out about what worked for them in these activities and what was the most useful. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you the successes, the kind of ability, to the best of our ability, and this is probably an underrepresentation of totals, but we were able to document that there were 4 workforce boards that became third-party providers in SNAP ENT, which means that they actually provided services through the program and were reimbursed for 50% of their costs through SNAP ENT funds. There were 2 that were both third-party providers and an intermediary, which means that they helped funnel money of SNAP ENT to other service providers. 2 were intermediaries, 1 was a subcontractor, and 3 were in the process of becoming intermediaries. So there was lots of movement amongst the boards who were working on developing a deeper role in the SNAP Employment and Training Program for either providing services directly or kind of being that intermediary to set up services for participants. And the NAWB team made lots of connections between these boards and their state and federal partners, as well as connecting boards with each other. So as much as possible, the federal SNAP ENT specialists from regional offices were included in events, and that in general, people that we interviewed felt that these aspects of the technical assistance helped them understand SNAP employment and training much better. So there was a feeling as time went on that more boards gained more expertise. And on the next slide, we were able to measure that a little bit. I'm going to show you the survey results. And again, as Kristin mentioned, the survey done in 2020, Zach, if you can change the slide, thank you, is shown here in the green bars. That was done to a random sample of workforce boards of NAWB members who responded to that survey. And then in 2024, it was another random sample, whoever responded to the survey through the NAWB distribution. And so they're not exactly the same folks, but we do see a really interesting matchup of the information needed was the question in 2020. And then in 2024, we asked them what information they had received about SNAP employment and training. And so you can see that lots of people have reported getting information. So I think that that is a measure of the success of the initiative, that NAWB really got out the basic SNAP employment and training information to its membership, which was a basic goal of the grant. And then there were there was definitely a matchup between the services and training, what SNAP employment training was all about. There was really good information in the peer learning that was offered, and also interestingly in how to engage community partners. People received a lot of assistance with that. Also good coverage in information about tracking data and performance, how to engage employers. And then there are just a few areas, and again, we can't take these results too literally, but it's kind of a foreshadowing of the challenges that we'll talk about in the coming slides, that there was still a need for more information about identifying the funding. So the challenge of coming up with the funding to launch the program and then later, receive the 50% reimbursement through SNAP ENT is a key feature of the challenges of becoming a third-party provider. And you could see people still were wanting more information about that, or fewer people that expressed an initial need. The need was greater at the beginning than what was reported received. And also people are really hungry, it seemed like, for step-by-step plans and for the really getting down into the nuts and bolts of billing and invoicing. So it's not just this complexity of how the 50% reimbursement works as a third-party provider, but really getting into that nitty-gritty, which can be complex with state invoicing, state agency invoicing, and billing. So that was really a window into both the effect of the project and getting out information, which was very broad, and then the kind of narrowing into what are the topics that people were still needing information on. On the next slide, just to talk a little bit about, again, the incredible success of the direct technical assistance that workforce boards received, both from NAWB and especially from Seattle Jobs Initiative, really helped boards set up formal roles in SNAP employment and training service provision. And we've got lots of quotes. We peppered our slides with a few of, just what people said about the importance of direct technical assistance for getting the insights and how to really move forward, and the complexity of braiding funding. It's a very hard task for many agencies to do, and it really involves a lot of different levels of expertise in your organization. And Seattle Jobs Initiative really helped kind of help workforce boards get over that hump. And then the next slide talks about support to building partnerships. We really found that those who were most successful are boards who already had strong partnerships with their local state and federal partners, with their local services. So boards that were already strongly connected to human services in their areas had an easier time of kind of taking their partnerships to the next level, where they might need to get into more kind of complex engagement, such as shared data. So partnerships really emerged from multiple ways. And also people noted that just going to forums and convenings and being in person really helped move forward their partnerships. And again, I just want to kind of paint the backdrop of the project with the COVID pandemic. It was just really hard as we went into the pandemic and all of you pivoted to online services. And it was such a crazy time and staff turnover, but really everyone persisted and used virtual means, and then have really appreciated in the last couple of years getting back together in person and having those in-person meetings. And we know how important it's been to our clients as well. And now we thought it would be really interesting to launch our third poll. Just thinking about the interests that you've got in your area, we're really interested as we go into kind of this next era of WIOA and SNAP employment and training partnerships. If you think there's going to be increased or decreased interest in your state or local region where you work, what's your sense of reading the kind of environment that you're in right now? Are people, expressing interest? Are they coming to you, or do you sense that there's a decreased sense of interest? So maybe Danny, yeah, she's got the poll up there. Thank you. And if you don't know, it's totally fine, but we're really interested in what your sense on the ground is right now. Okay. And I'll just, while you guys are answering that, also note that Kristin put a really wonderful case study up. And if you go to the next slide, Zach, we really wanted to hold up the successes of boards engaging with other boards. So peer-to-peer support really has become was a real focus of success for this project, and was one of the features that was called out to us in our research, that having these conversations and being able to exchange notes kind of down and dirty, how you really get things done, was really helpful to boards who were in similar circumstances or at a different stage of just, initiating their collaboration. And there's a great case study that NAWB published from Michigan, that the link is in the chat. And I think it's a really helpful tool. Oh, interesting. No one thinks there's going to be a decrease in interest. Well, I think that's really interesting. And that's how I'm feeling too. So thank you for confirming that for me. I think that as we go forward and more work requirements are reinstated or issued for the first time on people that are in SNAP and other public programs, potentially, there's going to be a need for more and more workforce board engagement in working with this group of individuals who have a lot of needs for supports that go beyond just the typical job search and guidance that many of your clients have. So let me stop there and ask, are there questions? I don't know, Kristin, is there anything from the chat or anything that you're seeing that people might want? Oh, thanks, Mala put the Kansas case study, which is, I think, is that the newest one, into the chat as well. All right, well, hearing none, I am going to go on to my next area of the presentation, which is to talk about the challenges that workforce boards told us about in doing this work. So we were able to, in interviews and surveys, talk to workforce boards about the challenges that they had experienced. And we kind of grouped these into four main categories. The incompatibility of multiple data systems, conflicting program and participant goals, staffing and staff training of programs, and then funding and return on investment. So I'm going to share our findings in each one of these areas in the next slides. So one thing that we thought was interesting when we asked again in 2020 and 2024, the same question about what are your challenges? Have you had any of these challenges? We saw a big increase in the number of people that noted that tracking data and performance was a challenge. In 2020, only 14% of survey respondents said it, and that more than doubled in 2024. And we think that that is a sign of increased collaboration. It's only when you start really working together, braiding your programs, funding, and jointly serving clients that you get into these data issues. And so we were kind of pleased to see that it was noted more, because we see that as a growing pain and a sign of increased collaboration. Similarly, the slight increase in identifying non-federal funding. So needing to have this match to be a third-party provider. So getting a 50% reimbursement for services is actually a wonderful boon to many workforce boards. But the catch is that you've got to have a match that's non-federal funds. So you can't use WIOA funds for that match. So I know many of you that are working on this are familiar with this challenge. So it means that you have to have state funding, which most states don't have, or many states don't have, or some funding from philanthropy is another big source. And identifying those sources, getting those grants from philanthropy or state grants that programs can match with the federal funding was a challenge that was recognized as, larger in 2024 when programs had more experience with this. And also, I thought it was really interesting that engaging employers was a greater challenge. Now, I don't know if this reflects the pandemic or what, but it was an interesting difference in the findings. And I'd mentioned also the understanding billing and invoicing. So those were the top challenges and the ones that stood out more in 2024 compared to when the project started in 2020. On the next slide, we'll show you a little bit more about why people found the implementation of SNAP employment and training programs through their workforce board challenging. People noted the complexity of the program, the lack of infrastructure in their programs to map onto the infrastructure in SNAP employment and training, or the lack of infrastructure in their state of the SNAP employment and training program, as the state was just still building up their program. And then, like I said, the non-federal funding was the biggest noted collaboration challenge. So this was a very, telling finding from from the survey results. A little bit more on the incompatibility of multiple data systems on the next slide. And I know I'm going quickly, but feel free again to stop me or to put a question into chat. This is not unique to workforce boards and SNAP employment and training. It happens when workforce boards are collaborating with any other systems. And many of you may have experienced this challenge with collaborating with a different system where that funding source or program has different data collection practices and usually different data systems completely than the WIOA data. And so it's a big challenge to enter. What it really comes down to is having staff entering the same information in more than one data system, which obviously is time consuming, and it takes staff away from doing direct service and can increase errors. And it also means that there's no one record that contains all the information. And so it's not a very efficient way of maintaining records. We did want to call out on the next slide that one workforce board had actually developed a tool. They created a case note tool that actually translated the WIOA language into SNAP ENT language and had a glossary of terms so that staff could interpret, because often putting the data in is just translating the data from one system to another. It's going from one terminology to another terminology. And so this was pretty cool that in their case, they were able to create a standard case note, put it in the tool, and it would turn out a SNAP ENT case note that they could put into that system. So with AI and other tools now, there could be more and more opportunities for systems to speak to each other and to facilitate this process. And on the next slide, I wanted to call out another important area, which is that what we heard from workforce boards is that there are different conflicting program and participant goals in these two programs, that often people in SNAP employment and training are really concerned about maintaining their benefits as their number one goal, and they want to eventually get better training and better jobs. But if they do it now, they might lose their childcare subsidy, their housing subsidy, and their food benefits and through SNAP. So that there's this issue of the benefits cliff, and really there are reasons that these folks are unable to really step up and create and earn more money right now. And so this really can make the programs incompatible in what counts as success. So what we know is that for WIOA programs, they need to be reporting that they are having successful job placement. And there's a concern that by serving SNAP employment and training participants, that it can make your profile of success look worse, and can actually jeopardize WIOA funding. And then moving along to staffing and staff training, this is something that I know you guys have heard a lot about. I probably don't need to say much about it, because the staff turnover and the constant need for training staff as the turnover occurs is a big feature of the pandemic. And finally, talking about the challenges of funding and return on investment, which is the next slide. Some boards found that in addition to finding the 50-50 match, the the becoming an intermediary and working with this program, that it wasn't enough of it, such a small program during this period of time that this grant was implemented, where the programs were completely voluntary. There were no mandatory participants. The numbers of people coming through the program could be very small. And so to put out the effort and to set these things up, as one workforce board reported, their annual budget being 15 million, and they were just bringing in 150,000 for Snappy and Tea. And in that case, they felt like that wasn't enough to make up for all of the effort that they put into it. And they had to consider their administrative overhead costs. So I'm gonna keep going because I'm going too slow, I'm being told. And again, I see that there's some good, there's some questions about speaking more about the challenge on non-federal funding. Did I answer your question enough, or do you have a specific question?
No, yes, you did. That was helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, the 50-50 match is the same thing as the 50% reimbursement. So you match with the federal reimbursement through SNAP Employment and Training 50% of non-federal funds. So that is the 50-50 match that we're talking about. So we're going to go into promising practices, which I think I've already alluded to. The strong partnerships, really need to call that out as being really the most important feature of successful programs. And that workforce boards that were third-party providers really talked about the importance of taking on the role so that they could increase the number of folks in their community that they were serving. And on the next slide, I'll show you some results of what people felt like were the biggest opportunities of taking this on, and really being able to co-enroll people in multiple programs to increase the services that are being provided to this group of folks who need a lot of supportive services. And that more and more of what, if you're in a certain different areas have different populations, but there is this population of folks who are maybe returning citizens, who are recent immigrants, who have a lot of language needs or basic education needs, training needs, basic training needs, that Snappy and Tea is a perfect source of partnership and co-enrollment and funding for. So you're able to leverage existing resources and create additional services for folks in your community. And on the next slide, we really looked at who were the strongest partners, collaboration partners for folks. And so in the green bar, it shows partnerships that were really collaborative, like strong, co-funding, jointly providing services. And that was the one that we were most interested in. And so in that light green bar, it shows that adult education and community colleges were the leading collaborative partners. And it's a great place to start if you're thinking about starting a collaborative effort in your community, is to start with your community college partners. And they are a really good source for working together. So I'll keep going and just say that that workforce boards noted successful strategies of identifying and leveraging the expertise of partners. Promoting transparent communication was frequently talked about. Having frequent meetings and communication both between and within agencies. Have buy-in and expertise. This is hard work, working with people who are struggling at the level of just meeting their basic needs, having a roof over their heads, having enough food to eat, and that the staff need support to work with trauma-informed practices, and they need to be trained across multiple program systems. And then the other important one is to engage in diverse communities and to bridge the differences between your typical WIOA population and then more marginalized groups in your community. So these were the key practices. And on the next slide, I have a quote from a program that had been successful in blending and braiding their programs, because they said that their area had the highest number of TANF and SNAP participants in their state, and they had the highest number of people returning from incarceration. So there was this shared sense of helping to work in this area. And it really was gratifying to the community and to their staff to really work with the whole community. So what are our recommendations from our evaluation? And then we'll have time for questions. We really feel like the biggest areas for future support to think about are to continue to facilitate the peer-to-peer learning experiences, and this is one of them, where people come together and talk about similar needs for information. Work with employers to help build understanding of potential partnerships. Develop training for career coaches and site managers that highlight effective practices. Many WIOA programs felt that their states didn't offer enough training on how to serve the population, and they really felt like they needed to develop those practices, those trainings themselves. And I think that people could share these resources across workforce boards. Another whole area is rural workforce boards having specific challenges because of a lack of transportation and employers in their areas, for instance. And, continuing to work across on strategies that help data systems interact with each other is another one where there seems to be a lot of opportunity in the future for work together to really make it easier for collaboration to occur across systems. So these were the particular areas that we called out for NAWB and workforce boards to keep working on together, because we know the work is not done and will continue. And yeah, so we have some discussion questions, and also happy to entertain any questions in the chat that I missed. Kristin, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Madeleine. I just wanted to give you a minute. We did have some more questions about the 50-50 match and about the funding. And I wondered if you wanted to kind of walk us through that one more time and just cover a few questions all at once.
Okay. Trying to think if it would be best to give an example, or if is there an operator on the line who's doing this, who could share how it works in their community, maybe from Texas, or I know that there's a couple of you there.
Missouri, Kentucky, Kansas. Would also invite, in case you are not in a position to speak out loud, would also invite any comments in chat. So feel free to do that. Or even, yeah.
Yeah, and we also have, I know at least one federal staff person on who might want to share, a couple of examples of how it works in her region. Okay, love the specific question.
Here's one, Madeleine. If a budget is $150,000 and 30% is allocated to SNAP ENT, what is the reimbursed portion?
Right. So it would be half of what is spent for authorized direct services to the SNAP employment and training recipient. So I know we could go back to the SNAP overview, or you can look at the fact sheet from NAWB, and you'll see that there are, components of SNAP employment and training. So if you're offering any of those components, and it does include work experience, work-based learning, and educational programs, for instance, basic skills, you would need to document how much of that. So 30%. So if it was like $50,000 was spent for these particular participants in services, you would get $25,000 back.
Thanks, Madeleine. All right, that we know that's a lot of information. Oh, we have another question here. I'm going to go to the Madeleine. I'm defaulting to the chat questions before our discussion questions. So
yeah,
another
Georgia,
question.
that's a great question. The reason that that partnerships with higher ed are so successful is that many community college participants are already receiving SNAP, and they simply don't know that their educational experience would count as SNAP employment and training. And so there are many people enrolled in community colleges who are essentially getting, basic skills, vocational skills, education that counts. And so there's this thing called reverse referral, where the community college identifies people that are receiving SNAP who qualify for SNAP employment and training. And then you go back to the SNAP agency, get that person qualified in the system as SNAP employment and training, and then you can pull down those funds through the program. And I think that there has been an effort to make it easier for students to maintain their SNAP benefits. And many community colleges have gotten activated as they've realized how many students struggle to have enough food, clothing, shelter. And so there's a real sensibility about the students that are receiving SNAP and even assistance for them to get on SNAP. So it's a great partnership.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, it varies a lot to what community you're in and what state you're in as to how much, advocacy or support for community college students there is.
We have another question, Madeleine. Can curriculums built by partners qualify for PR reimbursement if there are no recurring charges outside of creating the program? S. Malloy, do you want to talk? Are you in a position to speak out loud?
I'm asking because, hi, I'm from Maryland with SNAP ENT, and I just want to get a better understanding, because I do recognize that throughout the different states, we operate a little differently. We have a total of 34 partners. And as we're streamlining our process, we want to make sure that we're answering questions correctly, that our knowledge is correct. And so one of the things we've had that we've seen that's unallowable are in-kind costs. So if a partner has built their own curriculum, there's no reoccurring charge because it's their software, it's their proprietary information. Is that something that's considered a participant reimbursement, or would that fall under a contractual service?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that I am not in a position to answer policy questions because I'm not a federal staff person. I strongly encourage you to reach out to your regional office partner and submit your detailed questions for them to clarify for you. But my understanding, as you were saying, is that overhead to set up a program, like creating a curriculum, renting a space, like establishing the program, is not a reimbursable service, but tuition charged, a fee charged to a student to participate in a program. So the fee for getting a certificate, or costs for getting books or uniforms or other materials that are required for that training program, those things are reimbursable.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Madeleine. I wanted to point, Lisa has a totally made up example from Texas, but I wanted to direct your attention to it and see if you had a comment or some context to provide. Can you see it, or should I read it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And Lisa, I don't know if you want to say, is this how you see things working in Texas?
We're in our first year of third-party partnership. And so that's why I said this is totally made up, because we haven't gotten to these levels yet. This is our first year, and we just have a handful of boards participating right now.
Great. And each one of those probably just has a handful of actual participants in the program.
Just barely, just barely a handful.
Yeah. So it's a very slow trickle, and it can be hard to engage folks, but this is exactly how it would work. Yeah. That's a great example.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Well, we're just about to wrap up here, but I wanted to just give, if there's anyone else who has just one more question, we can take one more before we sort of call it a day. We so appreciate your participation. These are terrific examples in chat and shared out loud. Anyone have a last one to wrap us up?
Well, I just want to say that, I don't know if Mala already mentioned it, but we're going to have a session at the forum, the NAWB forum, at the end of March. So for any of you guys planning to come to the forum, we hope to see you there. And we also are happy to answer questions. And I can't recommend enough reaching out to the federal staff that are at your federal regional office. If you need to know who that is, or you need help connecting, again, please just reach out to me or Mala, and we can help connect you.
Wonderful. Want to take us home, Mala?
Yes, thanks so much. Thank you, Madeleine and Kristin, for this great presentation and lifting up all the lessons learned. We really appreciate it. And yes, Madeleine, if you want, we will have a session at the forum on March 30th. For those of you who'd like to learn more and meet our colleagues in person and ask more questions and meet some folks who are have engaged with SNAP-E&T, workforce boards who have or are on the journey, they will be there. So, please join us if you can. I also want to thank our team, the NAWB team, Zach Wilkins and Danny Peak, who are sort of on and off camera, but also helping to develop and run this webinar. Really appreciate their time as well. And we'll share a recording and materials from the webinar following this session. It'll also be in NAWB News and our YouTube channel for those who want to take a look at the recording. So please watch out for those materials. Thank you for joining us. And if you could take a moment to complete a brief survey that will pop up soon or follow this session, we'd really appreciate it. Your feedback is really important to our own continuous improvement efforts, so we'd be glad to hear from you. So thanks again, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at NAWB as well as our presenters. And hope to see you in Washington, D.C. in March. Thanks again.